Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this game of baseball, 2 words. We're at Walnut Grove Field within historic Greenfield Village, Dearborn, Michigan. Dalman Knicholson will be leading off. They're playing by the rules here today of 1864 in Greenfield Village. They generally play 1867, but we're here for the Vintage Baseball Association Conference, where we have players from many different teams all over the country that play various years, and they settled on playing 1864. The big difference from 1867 being that in 1864, you can catch a ball on defense, you can catch a ball off the bat on the bound or on the fly, and the batter will be out. And so it makes it a little easier for the fielders, but it's considered by some a childish part of the game. So we have a foul ball there by the striker, and foul balls in this era do not count as a strike. So he did swing and miss once, and the ball was caught there on the fly, and striker is out. If he would have let that bounce once, the batter still would have been out. So we have 1 out here in the top of the first. You'll notice, or you may not notice, but in this era, umpires did not call a ball or a strike until after a warning has been issued by the umpire. If a batter refuses to swing at good pitches, the umpire can warn him. And if the pitcher continues to throw bad pitches, he can be warned as well. And at that point, there's a ball that was let to bounce, but they did not get it on the hop. It was until after they were warned. So we have 1 out. We have a runner on first. Grant Moore is batting now. Grant is local from here in Michigan. He's part of the 21st Century Town Ball organization that they're starting to form. It's a little different than what we're playing today. But they were here today to talk a little bit about what they're doing. Now you saw the pitcher, he faked one to first, didn't throw it. That's not a balk. See it again there. It's not a balk in 1864. It's only a balk if he starts his actual pitching motion and then fails to complete it, or if he starts from behind his second pitcher's line, or finishes in front of it, then it's a balk. But he can fake to any base as often as he wants. Once he starts his motion, he needs to finish it. And you can see there's a line out there. It's about 12 feet. It's about 12 feet long, and he has to stay in between those 2 lines. And you'll notice that the batter swung the ball, landed in fair territory, and then it went foul. So it landed in fair territory first, so therefore it's a fair ball. It doesn't matter what happens after that. And you see the young man coming up to bat. They did some recruiting out of the spectators to get some people interested in the game, and he wasn't quite sure where to stand. We don't have a batter's box per se, so it's not always obvious what you're supposed to do in this era. So they were helping him with that. We're always looking for people to become interested in the game, and he was struck with the ball, but in 1864, you do not get to take your base. As a matter of fact, if he were to have done that on purpose, he could have been called out because it kept the catcher from making a potential play at the base. So, but in this case, no harm, no foul. He just stands in there and tries to hit another one. So that is the 3rd out. He did swing and miss 3 times. The catcher did catch it cleanly, and that ends the first inning. No runs scored. We are now heading into the bottom of the first inning. The Hooligans batted first, unable to score a run. The Liberty Club will be batting here in the bottom of the first. These are team names just being used for this event, not official clubs. Again, this is teams that are made up of players from all across the country. Different players from different teams have come here for this conference and are gathering here to get a little exercise in playing some baseball. So Jeff Pine Tar Cornhouse from Connecticut is now batting. The foul ball, Mr. Cornhouse. Again, foul balls don't count as strikes. And you can hear, if you can hear the announcer in this 1860s era, actually even into the 70s and 80s, that they played a game with one single ball the entire day. So a ball that goes into the spectator area would need to be returned so that we can continue with the game, not like our current major league setup where the ball goes in the stands, you get a souvenir. There's another one that's going into the spectators. Another foul ball. Again, we're at historic Greenfield Village in Dearborn, Michigan. This is Walnut Grove Field 1. Ball left a little short. There's a ball to shortstop. Looks like he's going to make his first. Striker does. So bottom of the first inning, the leadoff batter makes his first. This young man is playing in the Latida uniform, the home team here. There's a foul ball. You saw the runner on first take off as if to steal, and he was caught. He would have been caught off the base if the gentleman would have caught the foul ball, but in this case, the ball was not caught, and he was able to make it back to his base safely. There's another foul ball. It was not caught. And just like a ball that is in fair territory, if it was caught on one bound, the batter would be out. That ball did bounce once, but the catcher was not able to field it cleanly. So he gets another chance to hit and hits a nice shot between shortstop and third baseman. There's runner from first makes his second, and the striker makes his first. And we have Bob Daly, who is playing as a Columbus Capital Baseball Club of Columbus, Ohio today. Bob has been known to never turn down an offer to play a game, so here he is today. Again, you'll see the pitcher make motions towards the base or look towards the base. There's no balk until he starts that motion or steps over the line.
So you'll also notice that the umpire is not calling balls and strikes on every pitch.
The pitcher today for the Hooligans is Scooter from the Chicago Salmon. There's a ball. Oh, was not held cleanly, but there's still can be a play at third base. Oh, ball was overthrown. So everyone makes their base. That is someone that's not used to it, playing on the fly. Catching the ball on the fly is not as easy as some people make it look, and that ball was not able to be held. So all the runners were advancing, and the striker made his first. This is Yvette Jacobson. She's with the Detroit Early Riser Baseball Club, one of the many females that play this vintage game. There's a play, overthrow. The runner from third scores. One run has come in for the Liberty team. It's a ground ball. Oh, the third baseman was not on the bag. overthrow. Looks like there'll be a play at the plate. And ball goes that way. Looks like all runners are going to advance. This is one of the not as good parts of our vintage game with bare hands. It is more difficult to catch, and making those extra throws doesn't always work well. But we did have 2 runs score on that, and the striker is at second base.
Not over the head, not bouncing before it gets to them, not outside their reach, not in so it would hit them. And if they don't pitch fairly, like the ball bouncing before it gets to them,
There's a fly ball to the shortstop.
repeatedly they don't do that.
Caught on the fly. It holds the runners. That's the first out of the bottom of the first. Earl McDaniel is batting. It's from the Eastwood Iron Horses of Dayton, Ohio.
The base on balls, and everybody advances whether they are forced or not on a base.
There's a fly to center field.
About bases on balls was
Ooh, he tried to catch it on the fly, was unable to. Runner from third scores. Runner from second is going home.
people don't like that rule. They think it's not right that they can get a base without having done like that.
Now the umpire has to make a decision. First of all, was she tagged? Second of all, did she go out of the baseline? So we're looking for the call from the umpire.
Excuse me. Striker takes second. 2 tallies on the play. 1 out.
So he called her safe, that there was no tag, and she was not 3 feet out of the baseline. This is Pipes batting, Robert Penkin from the Chicago Salmon. Another fly ball to the shortstop. Catches it on the fly. We have 2 outs. Daniel Jones, a shortstop, made that fine catch. Now batting Jeff Kozlowski. It's from the home team here, the Lottie Daws. He also is a teacher here at the Henry Ford Academy in Greenfield Village. So it's his home field, and he is hitting the ball directly towards his schoolhouse. It is right down on the same level as the fields, just off into the left center field area. And the ball goes that direction. Gets past the left fielder. The runner from second will be scoring. Mr. Kozlowski is about to round second. He's got energy, and he is getting to third, but the ball is not caught. So he is into third base with a 3-base hit. The term single and double and triple weren't being used in this area yet. It was how many bases did you make, and he made his third base. We're now waiting for the next batter, or striker, as they were called. This is Deb Reed. She has recently retired from vintage baseball, but is back here for the conference to revive her role. She played with the Rock Spring Ground Squirrels out of Decatur, Illinois. She's also played with a few of the St. Louis clubs, a rover, as you might say. And there's a ball caught on the fly by the first baseman, which will end the bottom of the first inning. Okay, we're here at the top of the second inning. This is James Hands. He is one of the spectators that came out of the crowd to participate in today's game.
We looked like we were short a couple of players, so we invited some players to come get their experiences as a ball.
There's a foul ball. Ooh, it was not caught on the fly or on the bound. Striker stays alive. He'll get another swing. There's a swing and a miss. We have 1 strike.
That was strike 1, even though there had just been a foul ball, right? So foul balls are never strikes.
There's a foul ball caught on the bound. Batter is out.
So what happened there? He hit the foul ball. It bounced once behind home plate.
David Boop will be now batting for the Hooligans with 1 out. David is with the Ohio Village Muffins out of Columbus, Ohio. The Muffins started playing vintage baseball back in 1980. not David was not there at that time, but he's part of that club that's been around for over 40 years. You can hear some of the chatter in the background. There's another foul ball caught. This one caught on the fly. 2 outs. Daniel Jones will now be striking for the Hooligans. Daniel made a couple of nice plays at shortstop that last inning. He is from California, actually, and is part of the 21st Century Town Ball group that's here. Their group gave a nice presentation today during the conference about their organization. There's a fly ball into right. Looks like it's going to get past. So any ball that goes over the train track. This is specific to Walnut Grove. Yeah, so it's being explained by Marcus Dixon, who is the announcer out for the field. But basically what he's saying, if you can't hear it, is that the very first early rules of the game, they talked about a ball that goes out of the field of play, and that would be in any direction. So it was a foul ball, and the train tracks designate the end of the field over there because we don't want players chasing a ball across the train tracks because the train may come by at any time. And so if it goes over the tracks on the fly, they're going to call it a foul ball. And that's just unique to this field. It's not, most fields that might be open that don't have a restriction as to how far it can go, you would never see that kind of a play. And now I hear the bell coming for the train, so you'll understand now why that we have that rule specific here to the Greenfield Village. Paul Zeladon from the Chicago Salmon is stepping up to the plate. They're going to be stopping the game here shortly as the train approaches, but they're going to let a couple of pitches go by to keep it moving. And they have a runner trying to steal second base, throw down. Made a nice throw, but the runner was able to make it safely into second base. We have 2 outs with a runner on second.
Stolen bases were a regular part of the game from the earliest days. People sometimes ask if stolen bases were allowed. The rules don't say it's okay to steal bases.
There's a swing and a miss for strike 1 on Mr. Zeladon. Pitching for the Liberty team, Mr. Kornhaus from Connecticut. We heard his name earlier today.
We have records from the 1867 World Tournament of Baseball that was held here at Detroit, rather.
A little low. You notice that as of this point, and I mentioned this earlier, there are no balls or strikes being called. Nothing's been warned yet. But a few more pitches that are either across the plate and not swung at, or unfair pitches that are unhittable, they may warn. There's another foul ball. But at this point, the pitching's been fine, and no one's standing and looking, so there's been no cause for a warning just yet. But that was how balls and strikes were called back in the day of this era, 1864. 1864 was the first year that the umpire could call a ball. Prior to that, it was calling strikes only, which started in 1858. Between 1858 and 1863, it was called strikes or swinging strikes. Starting in 64, then it was called strikes, swinging strikes, or called balls. And it was 3 balls and 3 strikes in this year. 3 balls, the batter would take his first. 3 strikes, the batter would be out. We have a single hit to right field by Mr. Zeladon. And Mr. Jones scores from second base. The first run for the Hooligans. This is Eric Shogron. He is from Stillwater, Minnesota. Plays with the St. Croix Club. There's a fly ball to second base with 2 outs. Ball was not held cleanly, but they were able to get the ball to second base for the force out at second base. 3 outs. We're heading now to the top of the 3rd inning. This is Doc Martin. It's with the Canal Fulton Mules.
He was 1860s, the ball, it works a little differently. The person who leads off the next inning,
Pitching now is Eric Shogron. He was the one who just was slipped down there when he hit it, but he's got himself a fair ball, and he's going to be rounding first, going for second base, and it looks like he's going to make it in safely. This is Ray Pachuta with the regular baseball club out of Mount Clemens, Michigan.
D strikes out, E strikes out.
With the Doc on second base, nobody out. Ray will be looking to bring him home.
They pick up the ball and step on home base for the third out. That means that hitter A just made the third out. So the next inning, hitter B would lead off. So B, C, D, E, and F would all get to bat twice.
There's a fly ball to the shortstop. Daniel Jones again. Catches it cleanly on the fly. Retiree Mr. Pachuta. We have one out.
So you can see how that could lead to some strategy. You might think about, okay, do I want to have to see these hitters again? Or do I want to get past these hitters?
Batting, Ed Schumann with the Canal Fulton Mules.
And that's an element of baseball strategy that has gone away.
Looks like we got a play at second base there, but the runner gets back.
Of the now Fulton Mules at the striker's zone.
We have a left-handed striker. You'll see the outfielders shifting a little bit. The term they used in the 1860s for that was playing to the tendency of the striker. So if his tendency is to hit the ball towards right field or right center, the defense will then shift to that direction to play for. You can see with his open grip, that is a very common grip in the 1860s. And he did get out at first base. Oh, runner from third. Got shot down running. But the runner makes it back to third base. So that's an unfortunate. He would have scored a run, but somebody jumped up and grabbed his foot, I guess, and took him down. And he fell down before he could get to home plate.
To make it easier to catch a thrown ball or a hit ball. If only there were some.
One of the things you guys may be noticing on the screen is that the players are not wearing gloves. Gloves hadn't been invented yet. And the only type of a glove in this era that somebody might have worn would have been more of a work glove with fingers cut out and more to protect their hand from an injured hand from getting worse. It wasn't to help catch the ball. A glove with a webbing really is a 20th century thing. Into the 1920s, 1930s era, those started. You have Doc Martin scoring a run. So, yeah, gloves, you won't see a glove that you would recognize for another 60 years, if you will. They did have padding on their hands in the 1880s, but it didn't have a web. And some of the baseball fielders felt that it would made it even harder to catch a ball because the leather was not soft. It was a tough, stiff leather, and the ball would just bounce right out. So a lot of players, I shouldn't say a lot, many players would choose to not even wear a glove even after that style of glove came out. So, but some did, especially a catcher and a first baseman. They wanted something on their hands because they were taking throws way more often than anybody else. But in our game here, you'll see it all be barehanded, and that's just the way it was. Not anybody trying to be tough or act tough. It's just they didn't know any better yet. Like I say, it wasn't for another 20 years at least that they even came up with anything to put on their hands, and then another 40 years after that before they decided, well, there must be a better way to help me catch it, actually, and put that webbing in there. But it's a unique part of our game, but it does scare a few people away that may not want to risk their fingers if they're a piano player or a chiropractor or surgeon, somebody that makes a living with their hands. They may want to stay away. But for the rest of us that don't care about our fingers, we love playing. And the barehanded game makes it fun, makes it different.
There was a nice hit, like the one that Mr. Kozlowski hit a little earlier. You might say, well struck, sir. Strike one.
This is Eric Squarehead Berg. He played for many years, played for the Long Nine out of Springfield, Illinois. That's the uniform he's wearing today. Currently lives in Bemidji, Minnesota. Moved up there recently to take on a job as a professor at the university there. Came to the conference to give a presentation on a gentleman by the name of Prince Honeycutt, a African-American baseball player from Minnesota. Had a nice historical feature on him. And decided he's going to come play in the game with the rest of them. So glad to have him here. Jacksonville, Illinois is famous for Abraham Lincoln. They have one of his log cabins in Jacksonville, but that concludes the top half of the third inning. And we'll be back for the bottom in just a second. He was batting at the last inning, but the out that he made forced a runner at second base, not him. And with the way the rule works in 1864 is whoever makes the third out, it is the batter who stands next in line that will lead off the following inning. And in this case, the runner at second base was the third out, and the person that followed him in the order is the one that was batting. So he'll be batting again here. As you see, top of the inning. Got a fly ball to shortstop, held by Mr. McDaniel. We have one out. Now batting, Mr. Bill Polafron, who is here from the Central Florida League, Orlando club, the Awkwards of Central Florida. He's got an interesting stance here. He likes to hit foul balls down the third baseline, fair balls down the third baseline that will trend foul. We'll see if he tries to pull that one off. Nope. He just hit it right to the third baseman. And ball was held at first base, so we have one out.
Jim Creighton was a pitcher who put extreme velocity on the ball. And by most accounts, if we read the descriptions of what he was doing, he was probably cheating by putting a little twist in the ball.
This is Brian. I don't have his last name in front of me. He plays with the Wyandotte Stars out of Wyandotte, Michigan. We'll be batting now with one out.
But he had speed and control. But he became even more popular, as sometimes happens, because he died young. He was in a game.
Mr. Cornhouse still pitching for the Liberty. There's a pop fly out into the right field area. Miss Reed was not able to corral it on the fly. The striker makes his first and stays there. Nate Cox from the same Wyandotte Stars out of Wyandotte, Michigan will now be batting, trying to move his teammate around.
The late lamented Creighton, but also pitchers who tried to pitch swiftly without control were would-be Creightons. They wished they could be Creightons. They were trying to deliver it swiftly but couldn't do it with the...
You may hear the announcer, the ball gets past the catcher and the runner is advancing to second base. You may hear the announcer, as I started to say earlier, is talking about a gentleman by the name of Jim Creighton. He was one of the more famous and better pitchers of the mid to late 1850s and early 1860s because he was able to bring the ball with a sufficient amount of speed that could get past many of the batters, many of the strikers. That wasn't a common thing back in the day, as common, and he was then known for that, and many teams would offer cushy jobs for him to come to their town and be the pitcher. They weren't allowed to pay the players openly, so they would offer them jobs and whatnot, trying to convince them to come play for their team. But the reason they were talking about him is that he was on his way to be a superstar of the era, and he kind of already was there, but unfortunately was struck in the chest by a ball in such force that he didn't survive. He died at a young age of 22, so we will never really know what could have been of Mr. Creighton. but he opened the door for many other pitchers of the era to go from a softer toss to a swifter pitching, as they called it, and turn the game into a battle, a little bit of a pitcher versus a batter versus the defense, which changed, of course, the game a little bit, and enough that as they progressed a few years later, the professional game started, and having someone that could pitch swiftly and accurately was very much an asset. But that concludes the top of the third inning. No runs scored for the Hooligans. And we'll be back in the bottom of the third. So we're heading back now, bottom of the third. Again, as what happened in the top of the inning, this is Eric Squarehead from Jacksonville, Illinois. He was the striker when the third out was made, and that out was made at second base. And so he was the batter that followed that third out in the order. So he will be leading off this inning. It does happen from time to time, but here it's happened twice in the same inning. Squarehead is out at first base. And now batting Jeff Pinetar Cornhouse from the Liberty Baseball Club of Connecticut. He is in uniform, though, as a Knickerbocker experience, except for the hat, which is he's got blue stripes, which the Knickerbockers didn't have. But he's representing Doc Adams and the Knickerbocker Baseball Club of New York, 1859, in what he's wearing. He's got a fly ball towards left field. It was caught on the bounce. For one out, Shorty from the La-Di-Das will be the striker with one out. Two outs. My apologies, there are two outs. I forgot about that ground ball in the first batter. So Shorty from the La-Di-Das, two outs. Out towards center field. That is not a good jump. It looks like we're going to be a base hit. He rounds first and looks. Shorty makes his first. Two outs, Bob Daly from the Capital Baseball Club out of Columbus, Ohio. We're hoping to keep this inning alive. It's kind of hard to Shorty takes off, makes a second base. It's a little hard to see, but there at one point there was a line that runs through the center of home plate, the striker's line, and you were to have either both or 1 foot on the line or straddle the line as kind of a modified batter's box, if you will. But we'll finish that story when we come back into the top of the fourth. But we are now finished through 3 innings, and we still have a score of 6-1 in favor of the Liberty Baseball Club. Ball was caught very, very, very nicely by the catcher on the mound. The ball did not come up very high, but he got his hands down and was able to snare it for the first out. I was incorrectly saying the score after the end of the last inning. It's 6-2 in favor of the Liberty, not 6-1. This is Grant Moore from Michigan. He is also part of that 21st Century Town Ball group I mentioned earlier. Foul ball was not caught that time. Stays alive. So the game that's being played is considered the New York game. The 21st Century Town Ball group are creating a set of rules that if the Massachusetts game, which was a different game, if they would have continued playing that game instead of the New York game, what that might have looked like. So back in the 1860s with the New York game and the Massachusetts game, the New York game won out, and the Massachusetts game eventually died out in about 1865 area. The runner was thrown out to second base. Well, what they decided to do was, well, if the Massachusetts game had won out and the New York game didn't, what would the game today have looked like? So they've created that scenario, and the Massachusetts game was so different than the New York game that it would not have looked much of anything like what you're seeing today at your local Major League Baseball stadiums. We don't know for sure what it would have looked like, but they did a good job of doing some research on how the game was played back then, some of the things that they did change and didn't change as they went along, and tried to apply that going forward 160 years. So while I was talking about the Massachusetts game, the pitcher had thrown enough bad pitches or unfair pitches in a row that the umpire did give him a warning. But the next pitch that came in, the batter swung at, so no ball count was to be called. So we'll be back at the top of the next inning. Hey, coming to the bat. Coming to the bat is Yvette Jacobson of the Detroit Early Risers. She did strike earlier in this game. The gentleman pitching is one of the spectators. We'll see how he's able to do. With an event like this where people out, not really two teams facing each other, but more a group of people just out playing, and it's good to give an opportunity to some people that have never tried it before. You never know. So he's had a couple a little off there with two. Let's see how he brings the third one in. No. No, there was a question if that was counted as a strike. Foul balls, again, do not count as strikes. There's a swing and a miss. One strike.
You may see that the pitcher has, there's no mound, there's no hill for the pitcher to stand on. That's
We're still at 6-2 here. There comes a good pitch, and the ball was struck to left field. Scooter catches it on the mound. Again, this is 1864 rules, so it was referred to as the bound game back in that day, meaning that the ball caught on one bounce or one bound was still an out. It did change the way the runners were able to run bases if they were on base, but with no one on base at that at bat, the impact of a ball caught on the fly or on the bound was the same. Batter's out. If they were playing 1867 and that ball hit the ground, the runner would keep going to first base, and they'd have to try and get him out there with a tag out or a force out. Temperature is picking up here at Walnut Grove. The forecast is for mid to upper 70s, and we're approaching that quite rapidly. A few clouds in the sky, but for the most part, it's a sunny day. Nice, beautiful day for baseball. If you joined us late, we're at the historic Greenfield Village, Dearborn, Michigan. Walnut Grove Field, which is kind of on the, I guess, the south end of Greenfield Village, kind of down in the valley a little bit. But a really, really nice spot for baseball, and they draw a good crowd for their home games. And there's a good crowd here today watching this exhibition. So the umpire did warn there was a succession of unfair pitches, and now he's starting to call balls on those unfair pitches until the batter is able to get a good pitch or swing. They'll continue to call that. And in 1864, it was 3 balls, and the batter would get to take his first base. It's not something that the batters look to do. Everyone wants to hit, but sometimes if the pitcher can't get you a pitch you can hit, you have no choice but to take your base. And that looks like a third pitch will be ball 3. So he takes his pitch, or takes his base on that third foul ball, bringing up Earl McDaniel from the Eastwood Iron Horses out of Dayton, Ohio, and it looks like they are switching pitchers, which is perfectly fine in this era. Yeah, so he got his practice in. He'll say he's been able to pitch in a vintage baseball game. Mr. McDaniel hits it to right field. It skips past the right fielder. It stays inside the tracks, it looks like. The runner from first makes his third and now is heading towards home on the overthrow. Striker makes his second and remains there. A run scores.
Striker takes second, tally on the play as well. We had a game a couple of years ago where the umpire thought, oh, we can get one more pitch in.
That was Bob Pankin, pipes from the Chicago Salmon.
And then the hitter hit straight to right field.
Runner from second makes his third, and the striker makes his first. Bringing up Mr. Kozlowski
So the player couldn't go
with the home team Latidas Baseball Club here from Greenfield Village. Again, as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Kozlowski, he goes by Cougar, is a teacher here at the Henry Ford Academy in Greenfield Village. And his school is out there in left field area.
This is Mr. Kozlowski Cougar.
Ball gets past the catcher, and it looks like Mr. Pankin from first is going to make his second on the ball that gets by the catcher. I almost said pass ball. They didn't use that term really yet. The ball did get by the catcher, letting the runner from first advance to second. Mr. Cougar gets a hold of one. It looks like it's going to go over Scooter's head. Was not able to catch it. The runner from third scores. The runner from second had to hold up to see if the ball was going to be caught, but he does make his third base, and Mr. Kozlowski makes his second on that strike. Bringing up Miss Deb Reed from the Rock Spring Ground Squirrels out of Decatur, Illinois. Again, as I mentioned earlier, Deb actually retired from playing vintage baseball a few years ago, but she was a speaker here at the conference and decided to dig out the uniform and be a part of this event. She has an opportunity now to bring a couple runs home with a base hit. Oh. In 1864, she would have been called out if we were playing by official rules. She interfered with the pitch, not allowing the catcher to make a play. Ball was caught on one hop by the catcher, one bound, I should say, and holding the runners at second and third. Bringing up we're listening to the announcer explain to the crowd what's happening there. This gentleman's with the Canal Fulton Mules. Foul ball goes back, was not caught on the bound. So he will continue to swing again. Foul balls do not count as strikes in this era. It would be another 15 to 20 years before foul balls would start counting as strikes. It's quite some time from where we're playing now, from the era we're playing now. There's a swing and a miss for one strike. So again, with foul balls not being counted as strikes, it was a swing and a miss or a called strike after a warning. That would get you a strike. There's another foul ball. But foul balls could be caught on the bound, just like a fair ball, and put the striker out. So the catcher's got to be on his toes for those. There's a swing and a miss. 2 strikes. On a third strike, swing and a miss, the catcher does need to catch the ball cleanly. If he does drop it, the runner must make his attempt at first base. And there he can run if he wanted to. Ball did bounce twice, but nothing was called, so they're calling that 3 outs. So we will conclude the inning on that out. We'll be back at the top of the next inning. Okay, we're heading to the top of the 5th inning. David Boop from the Ohio Village Muffins is batting. There's a foul ball caught cleanly by the catcher. 1 out. Let's see who will be our next striker. Again, we're playing rules from 1864. Would be the first laws of baseball that we would consider kind of the official start to baseball. And again, the baseball being 2 words, was in 1857. When Doc Adams and the New York Knickerbockers held a convention, and that's when they penned those first rules of 1857. They were kind of codifying the rules for everybody to play by. There's around 16 clubs in that era. And so now, 1864, they've had a few conferences by now. The game has changed a bit. Every year they would get together at the end of the season and discuss what do we want to change. And over time, the game changed, and it's still doing that. Even today as we speak, obviously, when now we've added a designated hitter to the National League. And, it's a non-stop set of changes that can be made. And in this early part of the game, the changes were maybe a little more drastic because the game was so new. They didn't really know for sure, what they were doing. They just knew they wanted to have this game. So, example, in 1857, the umpire was not allowed to call a ball or a strike. And in 1858, they decided, we got to have the umpire be allowed to call strikes because the strikers were getting a little too picky. They were waiting too long for a good pitch, hoping that if there was a runner on base, they would advance to their next base, or what we would call steal a base. And so sometimes the pitcher would throw 30 or 40 to a batter with not a swing. So in 1858, they said in order to fix that, we're going to allow the umpire to warn the striker, and after a couple of pitches, give that warning, and then he could start calling strikes on the batter. So you see the players now cheering and waving. There is a train, a touristy train that comes through Greenfield Village. Those paid patrons that come in are allowed to jump on the train, and it takes them in a complete circle around the village. When it passes by the field here at Walnut Grove, all the players stop what they're doing, take their hat off, and wave to the train. And we don't allow play to go by. In case the ball goes up there, we don't want any of the players running that direction while there's a train in process. So they will now resume play after that. But it's a nice feature of Greenfield Village here in Walnut Grove. Ball gets past the catcher. The runner makes his head first slide into the base. So that, again, they didn't use the term steal yet in 1864. He advanced to his next base, and you can do that either anytime the ball is live or on a pass ball by a pitcher. So in that case, he waited until the ball got past the catcher. But he is also allowed, as the pitcher is, pitching, to advance to his next base as well if you'd like. But it's not mandatory, of course, no different than today's modern game. Not everybody tries to steal a base. Not everybody runs.
A normal slide to the extent that sliding happens. Sliding has not yet developed as a strategy.
So you can hear the announcer in the background talking about the sliding part of the game. Yep. And he's explaining how, just like in stealing wasn't a term yet in baseball, sliding really wasn't much of a term yet in baseball in 1864. It was referred to as laying flat, or in some cases, because they didn't know really what was going on, they called it falling down. And the point of it really wasn't to get to a base quicker. It was to avoid a tag. Sometimes it was more of a game of cat and mouse with the runner trying to just do nothing more than avoid being tagged. In that case, it was a modern-looking slide into second base, but what we try to avoid having our vintage guys do is slide feet first into the bases, because that really wasn't how they did it in that era. So like that would have been not really a legitimate slide in 1864. So the bases are loaded here.
reason is that a ball is determined fair or foul based on where it touches the ground first.
Bill Polafron from the Central Awkwards of Central Florida is batting. And if you're watching that last at bat, the gentleman hit the ball straight down, landed in fair territory, and then bounded foul, which is a fair ball in this year. It's determined by where the ball hits the ground first, fair or foul. So if it hits fair and spins backwards foul, it's still a fair ball. But once it lands foul, it's always a foul ball. Again, we have bases loaded. Bill Polafron trying to bring some runs in for his club. Hits the ball out towards second base. The ball was not fielded cleanly. Overthrow of first base. A run does score. So we have one out here with one run in. Brian from the Wyandotte Stars, Wyandotte, Michigan. Hoping to keep the inning going. Bring some of those runners in. Foul ball, and it was caught. It was considered on the fly, even though it hit his hands and bounced up. It never did touch the ground. And if it had bounced out of his hand, touched the ground once, and he picks it up, it is still an out. But in that case, he got it to pop up in the air, pulled it down, and recorded the out, the second out of the inning. Bases loaded for Nate Cox. Nate's also from the Wyandotte Stars out of Wyandotte, Michigan.
We just had a question here. Is that guy catching? Is that Shorty who used to be the team mascot and bat boy?
Ball to the pitcher who catches it on the fly for the third out. They leave the bases loaded.
The answer is yes, it is.
We'll be back for the next inning in just a minute. We are now heading to the bottom of the fifth inning. It's 8 runs for the Liberty Club and 3 runs for the Hooligans. Scooter Zeladin is back to pitching for the Hooligans, and Mr. Pachuta, Ray Pachuta from the regular baseball club of Mount Clemens, will be the striker. I believe this will be played as a full 9-inning game because we are allotted 2 hours for that. And generally, in 1864, a 9-inning game would take closer to 90 minutes, so we should have plenty of time, even though we started a little bit late. You have a foul ball, not caught. Not caught. Mr. Pachuta stays alive. We'll be continuing to bat. Again, nobody out. Bottom of the fifth, 8-3 in favor of the Liberty Club. Another foul ball, bounced. It bounced twice. If he could have got that on the first bounce, it would have been an out. There's the drive. Well struck ball, but it bounced right up to the left fielder, who hardly had to make a move at all to get that ball.
That was a one-bound ball. So it was a line shot, bounced once.
Brings up Mr. Ed Schumann from the Canal Fulton Mules. And again, if you see him on the screen, he's got the split grip on his hands, grounds it to the pitcher. We get an assist from the second baseman, who then tosses it to the first baseman. It's a good heads-up play by the second baseman to cover that. This brings up Mule from the Belleville Stags. a discussion going on here between the last striker and the umpire. making his case known. 3 outs. A little entertainment there on the side for the folks at the field. And we now will be going to the top of the 6th inning. The score remains 8 runs for the Liberty, 3 for the Hooligans. Here we are at the top of the 6th. Mr. Pachuta is still pitching. Did not catch this gentleman's name when he came up to bat. Swing and a miss. Appears to be with the Detroit Baseball Club, locally here in Detroit. I'll try to catch his name when he comes back around. It's a ground ball to Mr. McDaniel at short. First baseman was not able to hold it. Gentleman makes his first. You may be hearing a band in the background. The Dodsworth Band is here today to celebrate the baseball event. It's playing songs in between innings, and they regaled us with some songs before the game. Ball gets by, but the runner does not advance. Swing and a miss. 1 strike. Pop fly over towards right. It drops in for a hit. Oh, they make a throw to first, but unable to get him. So the runner from first makes the second. The striker makes his first. Mr. Grant Moore is up to bat. Grant Moore's from here in Michigan, part of the 21st Century Town Ball Group. If you're interested in learning more about what they're doing, they do have information on Facebook and on the internet. If you just research 21st Century Town Ball, you'll find it. Town Ball, all one word, because they're bringing it into the 21st century. Where I mentioned earlier, baseball in this era was 2 words. It had not become 1 word. Ball was not held in center field. Runner from second now is rounding third, coming home. Runner from first made it to third, and the striker made his second. Hear some noises in the background when runs score. They have some noisemakers here at the field that some of the spectators used to indicate a run has scored. It wasn't part of the historical accuracy of the baseball of the era. It's just something fun that the spectators do. And this is another gentleman who is here as a spectator. He tried to do some pitching earlier in the game. Now we have him up to bat. Ball is fair. Runner from third scores on that. It was the ball landed fair and then spun back foul. I mentioned that earlier. It's a fair ball in 1864. Again, determined based on where the ball hits the ground first. It's another interesting and fun part of the game of this era. And again, this is we're trying to talk to this as the rules of the game were played back in that era. It's not something we've made up to do today. It's trying to recreate the way the game was played back in that era as close as we can. Obviously, we'll never get it 100%, but we do take the time to do the research. And the pitcher is able to retire the runner or the striker, but the runner from third did score on that play. That was not the third out. Oh, we have a time on the field. We either have an injury or something in the shoe. We'll let them figure out what's going on there. Take a break in the action. Coming back to action here, they helped that young man out the field. Looks like he's okay, which is good. It is a part of this game that we have to be cognizant of, that there are injuries. Playing a barehanded game and playing by a set of rules that not everybody is thoroughly understands and knows. And in this case, everything is going to be just fine. And we'll get back to the action here. Daniel Jones up to the bat. Again, Daniel's with the 19th Century Town Ball Group. Came here from California for a presentation. There we have a ball that came down into fair territory. Oh, looks like there was an overthrow there at first. Mr. Jones going for second. The runner that was on second is now coming home to score. Brings up to the plate Paul Scooter Zeladon from the Chicago Salmon. So we have a runner on second with one out. We do have one run in this half of the inning. So drive out into the right center field area. Runner from second is coming home to score. Throw comes into the pitcher, holding the runner at first. Still have one out. With the runner on first now. 2 runs are in. This brings Eric Shogron to the plate. Sugar is again for Stillwater, Minnesota. Is here as a representative from the Phoenix Bat Company. They are one of the vendors here today. They provide vintage style, 1860s or 1870s style bats. For those of us that play this game, they try to make them close to the specifications as they can of the era. With new modern technology, we are limited somewhat on what a lathe can do versus the whittling that they would do back in the day. And as we learned at one of the speakers today at the conference, they did whittle their own bats. They didn't have the equipment to turn like they would today. But it allowed them to make bats basically of any length they wanted. There was no restriction on the length of the bat until 1868. So prior to that, the bats could be any length they wanted, and we've seen pictures and citations in newspapers that would put bats in the 4-foot range and sometimes 5-foot range, maybe not as often. And what makes it interesting is that when they finally, in 1868, decided to put a restriction on the length, it was 42 inches, telling us that we know now that they were using bats bigger than 42 inches prior to that. Why else would they put a restriction on it? So what you're seeing today, there aren't a lot of 42-inch, 44-inch, 48-inch bats being used. Most modern people would have a difficult time swinging that. Their upbringing in a modern era tells them things like bat speed and exit velocity, things that they weren't doing in 1860. They just wanted a big hunk of lumber to whack a ball with, and that's why they used lumber that was longer and heavier than what you might see today, or than you would see today. But most modern players aren't able to deal with that. So it's not very often you see one, but when you do, it's kind of a neat thing to see, the bigger bats.
So when you see a foul ball, especially one that you're not sure about, like a long drive down the foul line.
The only restrictions on the bat was that the barrel could not be more than 2.5 inches in this era, and it had to be made of wood. Those were really the only restrictions. As long as the barrel was 2.5 inches or less at any point in the bat, and it could be any length as long as it was made of wood, and it could be birch, it could be maple, whatever they might, whatever wood they might have. So this is Brian, nickname of Peanut with the Wyandotte Stars. They were just talking about the shield on his uniform. The uniforms you see on many of the players that have a shield or a bib, as it might look to you, were very common in the 1860s, and they would have a logo of sorts on that shield indicating where they were from. As time progressed and you get into the 1870s, you would see uniforms that would actually have the letters or the team name right on the jersey itself, and they just bypassed the use of the shield. The shield itself was designed from what the firemen wore back in the day, and I'll continue that story when we come back. So we're heading to the bottom of the 6th inning. It is now 8-8. The Hooligans put up 5 that inning to tie the game. So again, bottom of 6, 8-8. This is Todd Old Dutch Eschman from the Belleville Stags out of Belleville, Illinois. Ball nicely hit right up the middle. Old Dutch, I said Old Dutch. His nickname is Dutch. He had a bat company for a while. He was turning vintage bats, and it was the company was Old Dutch. Not the potato chip, but the baseball bat. And he now makes his first base, and this brings up Eric Squarehead Berg. Again, he's playing as the long nine out of Jacksonville, Illinois, Springfield, Illinois, if you will, I guess. But again, he currently lives in Bemidji as a professor at the university there. He doesn't have a team yet up in Bemidji, so he went back to his old club and got a uniform. Mr. Eschman now advances to his second base. Squarehead now has an opportunity with a base hit somewhere to bring home a run. Give his team the lead back. Foul ball. It's a high arching pitch, Ephus pitch. Now nothing wrong with that pitch in this era. It's some pitchers did throw a little slower. Some pitchers brought the swift pitching. There's a swing and a miss by Mr. Berg. Nothing wrong with mixing it up. Some swift pitching, some slower pitching. Nothing wrong with keeping the batter off balance in that era. Had a couple of unfair pitches there, so we may see a warning here if another one comes. We'll see what the umpire has to say. Oh, must have been close enough. Again, we have Todd Eschman, Dutch, out at second base, waiting to advance. Looks like a fine pitch that Mr. Berg let by. Again, just like they could warn for not pitching good pitches, they could actually warn the striker for not swinging it at pitches. But not every pitch is called. That's something that's kind of hard to get used to in this era. It has to be blatantly bad, like that, or so good down the middle they don't swing before they actually issue the warnings. If it's within a few inches either direction, the umpire has no reason to warn. But he did warn, and 3 pitches in a row that were bad after the warning, and their striker takes his first. And what you're seeing now is the runner from second is advancing to third. In 1864, you did not have to be forced to a base in order to advance. So if you intentionally tried to, walk a batter in order to load the bases, that wouldn't work unless there was runners on first and second. Any runners on any base would advance on a walk, just like they would on a balk, if that makes sense. So the runner on second was awarded third base, even though no one was on first at the time. Another one of the intricacies of the game. There's a lot of things about the game that you kind of have to pick up on when you're playing. There are some games where players come in relatively brand new and they're learning kind of on the fly. Preferably, you want them to have time to kind of study the rules and figure out some of the, as I said before, intricacies of the game of this era before they play, because you want the game to go smoothly, not have to stop all the time and explain things, but we do what we have to do to get people to play. There's a fly ball. Looks like he misjudged it. He's coming in. Mr. Eschman scores a run. Gives his team back the lead. Mr. Kornhaus from Connecticut coming up to bat. Again, his uniform is representing the Knickerbocker Baseball Club of New York, 1859. Other than the hat is not period appropriate for him, but he knows that. But he plays, his home club is the Liberty Baseball, one of his home clubs, the Liberty Baseball Club out of Connecticut. He's looking to add to his team's lead. Mr. Squarehead Berg is out at second base. Grant Moore is, I didn't catch that gentleman's name at first. See if he can move those runners around. Another inside pitch. Ball was knocked down by the pitcher. So we have a force at third base.
Runner is forced out at third. Second takes first, runner at second, there's one out.
So that runner that was Mr. Berg from coming from second base was forced at third for the first out of this inning.
We heard Mr. Rossi, our umpire, announce the result of each play. And the reason for that is that the scorekeepers need to know what's going on. They need to know what
This is Shorty from the La-Di-Das coming up to the plate. He's been doing a fine job as the catcher for his club this game. Now he's got an opportunity to bring a run home. We have runners on first and second base. Oh, he did ticket. There's a foul tip. And Scooter from the Chicago Salmon was able to corral it for the out. Again, ball caught on one bound. So now we have two outs. Mr. Bob Daly from representing the Capital Baseball Club of Columbus, Ohio. Lets a fine pitch go by. He was looking for something maybe inside. See what he does with this next pitch. We got a ground ball towards the shortstop. Knocks it down towards the second baseman who picks it up. Again, we got a force out at second base by Mr. Kornhaus, so that means Mr. Daly will be leading off the next inning. That takes us to the end of that inning with one run in for the Hooligans, or for the Liberty. We'll be back in a minute. Okay, Nate Cox from the Wyandotte Stars is coming to the plate. Going to face Mr. Kozlowski from the La-Di-Das as the pitcher. Again, Mr. Kozlowski, this is his home field, playing for the La-Di-Das right here in Greenfield Village. Very familiar with this area. Swing and a miss for one strike. Gets by the catcher, but no one's on base. Spectators here are familiar with Mr. Kozlowski at pitcher, and we're having a conversation with him. Fun part of the game when you are a spectator and you get to know the players. You can have conversations with them during the game.